Welcome to Families in Faith. We continue our summer series looking into the Bible stories found in children's Bibles and Sunday school lessons. The point is to dive into God's Word together with your children, getting a deeper understanding of the story and how it fits into the grand story that is God's love for His creation. This week we turn to the story of Abraham and God's covenant. Abraham begins the story of God creating a nation of people who He sets apart as His chosen. The story is simple enough. God chooses Abram, who later becomes Abraham, along with Sarai, who becomes Sarah. And in their old age, God promises to give them a son who will be the beginning of a great number of descendants. The story of Abraham starts before God gives him a son named Isaac. The connections from this story to the story of Israel leaving Egypt were very important to the first readers of Genesis. Remember that Moses wrote the stories of Abraham. He wasn't yet alive, so the stories came from God and were probably passed down from generation to generation. Moses captures those stories in the book of Genesis, written while the Israelites were wandering around the desert after leaving Egypt. Think about the original audience hearing the story about Abraham. God calls Abraham and tells him to go on a journey, and that journey leads him to Canaan, where God promises to give Abraham's descendants this land. This becomes known as the Promised Land. Abraham then ends up in Egypt because of a great famine throughout the land. And in Egypt, Sarai is taken by Pharaoh, and Abram prospers. Then God sends plagues to infect Pharaoh's house, who then tells Abram to take Sarai and leave, and Abram leaves a rich man. Well, this is exactly what happens to the original audience. The Israelites end up in Egypt because of a great famine. Remember that Joseph saved Egypt by storing up food during the 7 plentiful years and then selling it during the 7 years of famine. While in Egypt, the sons of Jacob grow into a nation of Israel and they prosper. Eventually, God uses Moses and plagues to motivate Pharaoh to let Israel go. And on the way out of town, they loot the Egyptians, leaving wealthy. Next, they wander around the desert, just like Abraham, headed to the land Abraham first went to see, Canaan, the Promised Land. God, it seems, was in the habit of telling His people that He knows exactly what He's doing. He has done this before, and we can trust Him. Well, back to Abraham. God promises him a son. Abraham and Sarah don't fully trust in God, so they use Sarah's maidservant to help God out. Abraham has a son through Hagar, named Ishmael. But God's plan is for a son born from Sarah. And even in their old age, God works a miracle and gives Abraham and Sarah a son named Isaac. God always keeps His promises. We can fully trust in His word. It applies to us today just as much as it did for the original audience. We can put our trust in the Lord.